Hey, February 22, 2026, Mexico. Woke up different. A piece of news that many thought would never come or that maybe has already come several times without confirmation. Today it's official, it's real, it's history. Nemesio Rubain or Segura Cervantes, known in the world of crime as El Mencho, the most wanted man in Mexico, and one of the most dangerous criminals on the planet, is dead, and today we're going to tell you exactly what happened, how it happened, and what this means for millions of Mexican families who have lived under the terror that this man helped to build. Stick around until the end because this story has many layers, many details that the big media won't tell you complete, and we're here precisely for that. Before going on, tell us in the comments where you're watching us from today, from Mexico, from the United States, from some other country in Latin America. We want to know who's on the other side of the screen because this story affects us all, and if this kind of content seems important to you, seems necessary, leave your like right now because that helps us keep bringing you information at this level. To understand the weight of what happened today, we need to understand who Nemesio or Segura Cervantes really was. Born in 1966 in Michoacan, El Mencho didn't start out as the leader of one of the most violent cartels in modern Mexican history. Like so many others who end up in that world, his story is one of decisions, of paths taken, of violence chosen, and it's important to say this clearly: no poverty, no circumstance, no origin justifies what this man built. There are millions of people who are born in difficult conditions and don't choose to destroy other people's lives. El Mencho chose, and that choice cost blood, cost tears, cost entire generations. He founded the Jalisco New Generation cartel, known worldwide as the CJNG, after the dissolution of the Mencho cartel. Under his leadership, that organization grew until it became one of the most powerful and most brutal in the American continent. Fentanyl trafficking, cocaine, methamphetamines, extortions, fuel theft, kidnappings, murders. The CJNG under El Mencho wasn't just criminal business, it was an apparatus of terror designed to subdue entire communities, to corrupt institutions, to make ordinary people live in fear of going out on the street. The United States government, through the DEA and other federal agencies, had placed a $15 million bounty on his head. $15 million, that tells you the level of damage this man represented, not only for Mexico, but for international security. The fentanyl that the CJNG trafficked reached the streets of U.S. cities, Canadian, European. El Mencho's decisions had consequences for families who didn't even know that their son or brother was consuming a drug that had passed through the hands of this organization. This news didn't come out of nowhere. For years and with greater intensity, during the last months, rumors about El Mencho's death or serious deterioration had circulated through alternative media, social networks, sources close to the drug trafficking world. January 2025, DEA agents would have pointed out in internal reports that El Mencho might have died due to severe kidney failure. Publications like El Blog del Narco and El Diario del Narco picked up those versions, even alleging that the Mexican government had decided to suppress the information to avoid an immediate explosion of violence. And that logic, though brutal, has a reality behind it. When a leader of that magnitude falls, the power vacuum he leaves isn't a quiet space, it's a battle, it's blood, and governments often calculate how and when to communicate that kind of news to try to contain the damage. In February 2025, additional reports indicated that medical teams had been deployed to areas of the Jalisco Sierra to attend to someone with serious health problems. Rival gangs began circulating messages, the so-called narcomantas, claiming that El Mencho had already passed away. A dissident faction known as Los Mezcals broke its alliance with the CJNG, arguing Precisely that its leader no longer existed. But without official confirmation, without concrete evidence, everything remained in the realm of speculation. The DEA kept El Mencho on its list of fugitives the Mexican government neither confirmed nor denied definitively. And the CJNG as an organization continued. Operating, continued expanding, continued terrorizing. All that changed this morning. February 22, 2026 will go down in history books as the day the Mexican state, with U.S. intelligence support, achieved what for years seemed almost impossible. The National Defense Secretariat Sedena officially confirmed that Nemesio Rubain or Segura Cervantes, El Mencho, died during a special operation carried out in Tapalpa, Jalisco, a municipality located approximately 130 km south of Guadalajara. The operation was the result of prolonged intelligence work. Coordinated between the Mexican Armed Forces, the National Intelligence Center, the Attorney General's office, and according to official sources from both countries' DEA assets and other U.S. agencies. It wasn't a stroke of luck, it was the product of months, perhaps years of tracking, information analysis. Silent work that doesn't make headlines until the results materialize. The operation's initial goal was to capture El Mencho alive. The Mexican Army's special troops arrived at the place where he was hiding with the intention of bringing him to justice. But El Mencho and the men surrounding him didn't surrender. An armed confrontation broke out in which 4 CJNG members lost their lives on the spot, 2 others plus El Mencho himself were seriously wounded, 2 people were detained. The armed forces seized armored vehicles, rocket launchers, and an arsenal of weaponry. El Mencho, with serious wounds, was transported by aircraft to Mexico City, where he was supposed to receive medical attention. He didn't arrive alive, he died during that transfer. 3 Mexican soldiers were wounded in the operation and hospitalized in the country's capital. The confirmation didn't just come from Sedena. Christopher Landau, U.S. Undersecretary of State, also made public statements qualifying the operation as a major advance in the joint fight against drug trafficking. The Trump administration, which had intensely pressured the Mexican government on security and cartel combat matters, celebrated the result as an achievement of bilateral cooperation. And here I need to pause for a moment, because it's very easy for this kind of news to become a cold exercise of data and timelines. But behind each of those numbers, there are families, there are mothers who identified their sons' bodies in clandestine graves that the CJNG helped create. There are journalists who were murdered because they dared to investigate this cartel's operations. There are mayors, police, judges, prosecutors who received the famous offer of silver or lead and whose lives changed forever no matter what answer they gave. There are entire communities in Jalisco, Michoacán, Guanajuato, Colima that lived under the CJNG's territorial control for years, communities where people couldn't go out at certain hours, where young people were forcibly recruited, where families lost businesses, properties, entire life projects, because a cartel decided that belonged to them. And there are families in U.S. cities who lost a son due to a fentanyl overdose. Parents who didn't understand what that drug was, where it came from, who manufactured it. Today they know or can know that a significant part of that fentanyl passed through the CJNG's networks under El Mencho's leadership. This man's death doesn't bring back the dead, doesn't close the wounds, doesn't rebuild what was destroyed, but it does represent something the state can achieve when it acts with determination and the right resources. Even those who think they're above any law, that no one, absolutely no one, is out of justice's reach forever. If there's anything that confirms the magnitude of the blow the CJNG suffered today, it's the speed and brutality with which its operators responded to the news. Within hours after the information began to leak, even before the official confirmation, multiple states in the country began reporting outbreaks of coordinated violence. In Guadalajara, Zapopan, Puerto Vallarta, the so-called narcobloqueos appeared. Vehicles strategically set on fire and placed to interrupt traffic, to sow panic, to show that even though their leader had fallen, the organization was still capable of paralyzing cities, images, and videos, circulating on social networks, especially on Platform X, showed columns of black smoke, people running in the streets, scenes of chaos in areas that hours before were just the daily life of thousands, of families going to work, taking their kids to school, doing weekend shopping. Guadalajara International Airport, one of the country's most important, was directly affected. Flights suspended, tourists trapped in the terminal not knowing what to do. Watching on their phones the chaos images outside, airlines canceled flights to Puerto Vallarta, one of Mexico's most visited tourist destinations. The U.S. Embassy immediately issued an alert for its citizens in Jalisco and neighboring states, instructing them to shelter in place. Canada and other countries followed suit. Schools in Jalisco closed their doors. Parents rushed to pick up their children. Employees were stranded at work. Everyday life, that life ordinary people try to protect and sustain every day, was interrupted abruptly by a criminal organization that, even in its greatest defeat, decided to use the civilian population as a shield and as a message. At least 32 blockades were reported at various points in the country. The violence spread beyond Jalisco to Michoacán, Guanajuato, Colima, and Tamaulipas. CJNG. Embers tried to set fire to a gas station in Guadalajara. The message was clear and obscene in its clarity. If our boss falls, everyone pays. And precisely that is what defines a terrorist organization. Not just the criminal business, not just drug trafficking, but the deliberate willingness to make innocent people suffer as an instrument of power and communication. President Claudia Sheinbaum spoke out, saying the Security Cabinet would provide detailed official information on the situation. The Mexican Episcopal Conference issued a call for calm, asking the population to avoid rumors and stay informed through official channels. Federal and state security forces were deployed to the most critical points. This is just the beginning of this story, because what's coming now, the power vacuum, the internal dispute within the CJNG, the implications for drug trafficking, for the relationship between Mexico and the United States, for the communities that have lived under this cartel's dominance for years. That's what we're going to explore in the next block. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. If you came straight to this part, I recommend you watch the first block, because that's all the context of what happened today in Tapalpa, Jalisco, and who El Mencho really was. But if you've already seen it, you know what we're talking about and why this second part is as important as the first. Before continuing, tell us again in the comments where you're following us from today. What do you feel hearing this news? Relief, uncertainty, skepticism? All feelings are valid and we want to read them. And if you haven't left your like yet, do it now. It helps us a lot to keep producing content like this. There's a cruel paradox in the death of high-profile criminal leaders, and it's something any security analyst, any academic who studies organized crime will confirm to you. The fall of a powerful leader doesn't end the problem. In many cases, it transforms it into something more chaotic, more unpredictable, harder to contain. El Mencho wasn't just a name, he was a structure of authority. He was the central node of a network of loyalties, fears, agreements, territories, roots, international contacts that don't disappear just because the man at the center no longer exists. The CJNG is today, at this moment, a huge organization with presence in dozens of Mexican states and connections in multiple countries. That organization isn't going to disintegrate overnight. What will happen, what is already beginning to happen according to everything we know about how these structures work, is a battle for control. Who takes command? That's the question on the table right now, and it's a question answered with violence. Rubén Oscar Gonzalez, El Mencho's son, known as El Menchito, was extradited to the United States in 2020 and currently faces charges in that country. He can't take the reins from a U.S. federal cell. Other high-ranking cartel leaders, second-line figures who operated in the leader's shadow, now become candidates to fill that space, and each of them has their own network, their own men, their own ambitions. The succession wars within Mexican cartels have a documented and devastating history. When the Sinaloa cartel lost key figures, when other organizations went through similar moments, the periods that followed were marked by fierce internal violence that inevitably spilled over onto the civilian population. Shootouts in broad daylight, massacres in communities unlucky enough to be in disputed territories, forced displacement of entire families who had to abandon their homes and lives from one day to the next because the war came to their street. That's what security experts are anticipating right now, a period of instability that could last months, possibly more than a year, during which the CJNG as an organization will try to reorganize while internal factions and rival organizations try to take advantage of the moment to gain ground. Ordinary citizens, as always, will be caught in the middle. 1. Dimension of this story that can't be ignored because its effects reach homes thousands of kilometers from Tapalpa. It's the role the CJNG under Mencho played in the fentanyl crisis that has devastated the United States in recent years. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid whose potency is approximately 50 times greater than heroin. It can be manufactured in relatively small laboratories with precursor chemicals that until recently flowed freely from China to Mexico. The CJNG, along with the Sinaloa cartel, became one of the main producers and distributors of fentanyl on the continent. The statistics are devastating. In the United States, fentanyl became the leading cause of death for people aged 18 to 45, more than traffic accidents, more than heart disease in that age group. Behind each of those deaths, there's a family. There's father who found his son unresponsive in his room. There's a mother who took her daughter to without making it in times. There's brothers, friends, partners who suddenly had to learn to live with an absence no one had warned them could arrive so fast, so without warning. The distribution network the CJNG built for that trafficking doesn't disappear with Mencho's death. The routes exist. The contacts in destination cities exist. The labs are still operating, but it's possible that the instability period coming within the cartel generates interruptions, reorganizations, and that intelligence agencies take advantage of that moment of disorder to identify and dismantle parts of that network that until now have remained more hidden. Trump administration, which had turned pressure on the Mexican government regarding drug trafficking into one of its central axes of foreign policy, already celebrated today's operation as an achievement of bilateral cooperation. It's also a demonstration for those who had questioned the Mexican state's willingness or capacity to strike at organized crime's big leaders, that this cooperation can produce concrete results. There are people in Mexico who tonight will go to sleep with a feeling they hadn't known in a long time, something like relief. People in Jalisco, Michoacan, Guanajuato communities who for years lived with the weight of knowing that the organization controlling their lives had an untouchable leader, a man the state couldn't or wouldn't rage. For those people, today's news has a meaning that goes beyond politics or security statistics. It has a human, profound meaning hard to articulate in words if you haven't lived it. But there are also communities that tonight can't go out on the street. There are families locked in their homes in Guadalajara, Puerto Vallarta, waiting for the blockades and gunshots they hear outside to subside. There are foreign tourists who came to know Mexico, enjoy its beaches and culture, who tonight are in a hotel room checking their embassy's alerts. There are airline, hotel, restaurant workers whose livelihood depends on those cities' remaining destinations people want to visit, and who today saw in real time how their city's image became associated with images of smoke and chaos. And there are also journalists, men and women who cover organized crime in Mexico and who know that moments of transition like this are especially dangerous for their work. Mexico is one of the deadliest countries in the world for journalism. Reporters covering drug trafficking operate under constant threat, and periods of instability within cartels usually come with an increase in that threat. Tonight, many of them are doing their work with the same silent bravery as always and deserve us saying it. This operation is an achievement. We have to say it clearly and without ambiguities. The intelligence work, the coordination between multiple agencies, the operation's execution under high-risk conditions, all that represents real institutional capacity, and that capacity deserves recognition. But we also have to be honest about what a single operation, no matter how successful, can't do. It can't dismantle decades of organized crime penetration into local government structures. It can't return land to families who lost it under intimidation. It can't rebuild the trust of communities who for years saw their local authorities co-opted, threatened, or simply unable to protect them. It can't bring back the disappeared, those in graves, those who went to buy bread won. Morning and never returned. The real fight against organized crime isn't one just with military operations. It's one also with education, with economic opportunities that give young people an alternative to forced recruitment or voluntary incorporation into crime out of desperation. It's one with justice systems that work, with prosecutors who investigate, with judges who aren't afraid. It's one with real protection for the most vulnerable communities, with victim support programs, with accompaniment for those who want to leave those environments and don't know how. None of that happens overnight, but all of that is necessary if we want El Mencho's death to be the beginning of something different and not just the prologue to the next generation of criminal leaders. If you made it this far, if you watched both blocks or read everything we shared today, I want to pause before closing and speak directly to you. It's easy when we see news like this to fall into one of two extremes. The first is euphoria, they got him, it's over, we won. The second is cynicism, nothing changes, there'll be another, this will never improve. Both are understandable. Both have some truth, but neither is enough if what really matters to us is the well-being of people living in communities affected by organized crime. The most uncomfortable truth is that the violence the CJNG represents didn't come from nowhere. It came from decades of inequality, denied opportunities, weak institutions, normalized corruption, a global drug market that generates obscene amounts of money for those willing to use violence as a business tool. That's not an excuse for El Mencho or anyone who chooses that path. It's a diagnosis, and diagnoses exist to be addressed. Every family that's tonight locked in their home in Guadalajara out of fear of narcobloqueos deserves something better. Every young person in a marginalized Michoacan community, growing up seeing organized crime as the only available option, deserves something better. Every mother searching for her disappeared son in prosecutors' records deserves something better. And the only way for that something better to happen is for more people, not fewer, to be informed, committed, willing to demand that their governments, institutions, communities build that future actively. That's why we do this, why we tell these stories, why it matters that you're here. Thanks for joining us in this coverage. The situation in Mexico remains fluid and will continue reporting as events develop. If you want to keep receiving analysis like this, you know what you have to do, and tell us in the comments what you think will happen now inside the CJNG. Do you think this will really change anything for the affected communities? Your opinion matters. We'll read you.